Hi, my name is Zelman Ainsworth. I have the great privilege to be teaming up with Narrative Conisby to host this new series about people in property. We felt that there's heaps of content out there with people predicting and forecasting what's happening, but in actual fact, nobody really knows what they're talking about. We're all in very strange times, and most of us are recreating, altering, processing our thoughts, feelings, and plans on a daily basis. We have created a new series interviewing people who matter in the property industry here in Australia across all sectors. We're going to be talking to leaders, decision makers, and role models to learn about their successes and failures, their accomplishments and fears. Our objective is to provide a platform that people watching can be inspired, uplifted, and encouraged. Together, Narada and I have managed to secure some of Australia's best people in property. We are both so very excited and happy to have the opportunity to host this series.
Today, Selma and I are really delighted to have Sam Tarascio as our first guest. And most of you don't need an introduction to Sam. He is the Managing Director of Salta Properties. It is one of Australia's largest private companies, $5 billion worth of projects either completed or currently in development. The company was started by Sam's father, also Sam, in 1970 with the development of a single warehouse. And it has been quite an incredible journey to get it where it is now. So really just starting off, Sam, we just wanted to find out how you were feeling at the moment. Obviously, Melbourne has just entered into stage 4 restrictions. We're in the middle of a pandemic. It's hitting property at all angles, no matter what sector of the market that you're in. So really, what are your fears and what are your biggest concerns at the moment?
Thanks, Nerida, and thanks, Salman, for having me on. Appreciate it. Look, I think the biggest problem at the moment is uncertainty. There is just a lack of clarity about, how long this whole situation is going to last and what the overall impact is going to be on businesses and the economy. So I think, for me, figuring out how this is going to actually get itself under control, just how long the impact is going to last. It's really important because of the personal health and well-being issues that are associated with, dealing with the health issue, but then dealing with the fallout, the economic fallout, I think are really critical to get under control. So from my point of view, it's really just getting a grip on how this situation is actually going to sort itself out or be sorted out. I don't think it'll sort itself out. I think it will need to be sorted out and we'll need to learn to live with it to some extent. And I think at the moment, there's just still a lot of uncertainty about how that'll occur.
The Salta Group have a number of tenants, if not hundreds, maybe even thousands of tenants across all your properties and sectors. If you can give one message to all of Salta's tenants, what would that be right now?
Yeah, look, every tenant is being impacted differently, obviously. And I think the biggest challenge through this whole period is trying to figure out to what extent, our tenant or, their clients really, we call them clients, how they've been impacted. Because we've all got obligations. They have obligations and we have obligations. So our overarching principle has been to try to get to the bottom of just how much support a client may actually need, because there are some out there who don't need it or through other measures have been able to find their way through. It's important that we as a landlord do remain strong because our tenants rely on us to supply a service. We rely on them obviously to pay rent and to occupy buildings and care for the buildings. So really it's about being open and transparent, really being clear with your landlord about what issues you're facing, how that's impacting your business, so that we as a landlord can actually make the right decisions about the level of support that might be needed.
One of the things that has been quite interesting through the pandemic has been seeing the reactions of politicians, and some have really stepped up, and others, I guess, have done some questionable things. So if you were in a room with Josh Frydenberg or Daniel Andrews or Scott Morrison, what are some of the things that you would want to talk to them about?
Look, I can't imagine the pressure that any politician is under at the moment. I mean, it is extreme. The demands on their time, they'll be being pulled from pillar to post. And quite rightly, they're very focused on dealing with the immediate health issue. They're very focused on making sure that the assistance is there for individuals and businesses where it's required, where there's distress. We live in a fantastic country here, and I think we're very lucky that our governments, both state and federal, have the ability to actually lend support. But probably the thing that I think is not being well communicated yet, that I think it is really necessary to do, is what is government going to do post-pandemic, and in Victoria post this current 6-week shutdown period, to actually help industry, help the economy figure out how it's going to find its way out of it. I think that there's been very limited communication from governments about the things they're thinking about in that respect, because it's all been very much focused on what to do now and how to react to the current problem. And as I say, that's understandable, but I think it's very hard to suggest that, businesses can just switch themselves on or find solutions. I think it's really important. And from a property perspective, there are so many things that potentially could be, could be done now or announced now that put us in a position to start planning for how we can come out of this period. And I think that would be my key message to them. Understanding we're busy dealing with the current problem, but we do need to think about how we're going to recover and what businesses are going to need to actually to achieve that.
I personally have a number of good relationships with people at Salta who report directly to you. They've described your behavior over the last 4 months as considered and fearless. But are you personally satisfied with your performance?
Look, I mean, it's very hard to just sort of self-judge, and I appreciate that feedback, Zalman. It's nice to hear. Look, our focus. You know who
they are, though, right?
Sorry?
You know who I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. Well, look, I think our obligation as a business has been to, and this is how it goes back to the one of the earlier questions you asked. How are we dealing with our clients, our tenants? I think as all businesses have an obligation where they can to continue to trade as best they can, because of everything that we're doing, every bit of business that we're still able to do is something that is a benefit, to the economy more broadly and to our people directly. So we have been trying very hard as a business to, communicate very clearly to our team. A little visitor there, Zone.
This is home. This is working at home. This is why we're going to be going back to the office.
Yeah, no, exactly. We're all having those little visitors in our meetings. Look, it's been very important for us to communicate very clearly to our team, what we're thinking about our projects, because lots of decisions have had to be made about whether we're going to continue with projects, whether we're going to put them on hold. Just what impact are they going to have on the business? So we've been trying to communicate clearly. We've been trying to keep everyone fully informed of the health issue that we have. But overarching everything is our determination to continue to do business. And so we've got a number of projects that are still underway. There've been tough decisions to make to actually keep them going because of the uncertainty we spoke about at the very start. And so I think, look, if the report card's good, that's fantastic. And I think that the main reason for that is because we've tried very hard, as much as possible, to keep things moving and keep things going and make our people feel secure in their roles.
Sam, does the pressure of maintaining and growing the Tarascio legacy and the Salta brand keep you up at night?
Thank you. That is an interesting question. I would say that, firstly, running any business of the scale of ours is a huge responsibility. So I think, you've got to be prepared for that responsibility. I think also, it is a huge privilege to run any family business, particularly one of the size that ours is. So, that's a privilege that my family affords me. Does it keep me awake at night? The answer, look, I think if it kept me awake at night, I think I'd be the wrong person for the role. At the end of the day, you need to feel very confident in what you're doing in your business. You need to be very confident about the things that your business is doing. And if you're feeling uncertain about it, then I think you'd have an obligation to self-assess and form the conclusion that maybe you should bring others into the business. So I think, I'm still excited by the business every day. I love what we do. I've grown up doing what we do. I've grown up in the property industry. So I've been at it, I'm 45, I've effectively been at it for 45 years. So I think whilst still loving it, we're still succeeding, still feel like I'm adding value. I don't sleep well every night, I have to say. And the last 6 months has been one of those periods where, sleep sometimes gets disrupted by what's going on. But overall, look, I feel reasonably confident that I continue to add value to the business. And so, yeah, I do sleep reasonably well.
So Sam, I guess the final question is around opportunity. So, we are in the middle of a pandemic, we've got rising unemployment, we're heading into a recession, it's very uncertain, as you said right at the beginning. But I guess in any bad circumstances that there are opportunities. So what do you think is the biggest opportunity right now?
Well, I think you're absolutely right, Nerida. I think any major shock, particularly something as severe as this, does create opportunities. And my attitude is that generally for any negative impact, there's usually a corresponding positive. And so you've just got to be able to find those positives. And as an example, if you look at retail, and you're obviously heavily involved in the retail sector, and there's been many comments made about the demise of bricks and mortar retail. But if you look at retailing itself, the overall spend, well, the spend is still there. It just might have been it's gone somewhere else. It's being made in a different way. So the opportunity there is to figure out where the spending is gone and how you can be involved in I guess, capitalising on that change. And it's no different for, there's a lot of talk about the office sector at the moment. There's a lot of talk about residential, because residential has also been badly hit. And so, you've just got to find ways of doing things in a different way than what they were done in the past. I often talk about the office sector. I get asked about it all the time. If you go back 5 years from now, or you go back 10 years from now, office looked very different 5 years ago and 10 years ago to what it looked today pre-COVID. And whilst I'm not going to pretend to tell you exactly how office is going to look in 5 years' time. What I know for sure is it'll be very different to what it is today, but we'll adapt. We always have, in every property sector, we always adapt. And so I think really that's the opportunity when there's market dislocation. It's just trying to understand how things are changing and to move with the times and make sure you're at the forefront of it.
There's a lot of young property professionals that are confused and lost and don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Never experienced anything like this before. What advice are you getting or giving to people in this generation?
Similar to sort of what we spoke about before in terms of the opportunity, property as a sector is not going anywhere. It's just a question of, and we're lucky as a business, we're sort of spread across, industrial, office, residential, some retail as well. So we have the benefit of being able to see across the sectors. And we can see in that, which sector, at the moment, probably the sector that's performing best is industrial. And that's because, we're all relying on home deliveries and we're relying on supply chains. Transport logistics is a sector that's thriving. And so we're lucky to be in that sector. But, that changes. You go back, a couple of years and over the last few years, office has been very strong. Go back sort of a little bit beyond that, and residential is very strong. So I think any young person coming into the property sector, I would say, needs to be able to adapt their skills across the sectors, because, we all still live in property, we all still work in property. Our population whilst not be growing, might not be growing as strongly today as it normally is due to the closed borders, but our population is always growing, so there is always a demand on property and across the sectors. So I wouldn't be discouraged if I was a young person coming into property. I think that there is Melbourne still, I think, always has been perceived, or always has been, a fantastic place to live, and people aspire to come to Melbourne. I think that that's not going to change. I think, if anything, post-pandemic, Melbourne, and in fact Australia more broadly, will be a place that people want to come to because of the way we've managed this situation. And, in the context of a growing population, you're always going to have a demand for property. But it's just about being flexible across the sectors and being able to adapt, perhaps even do different things. You might be a professionally qualified architect, but, you might find yourself in some sort of development management role, or you might be an engineer doing the same thing. I think just flexibility in how you apply your skill set and the sectors of the property field you're working in is really important.
I think the way Perth and Brisbane and now even Adelaide has popped back once the restrictions are lifted is incredibly inspiring and encouraging to see. Melbourne is a far better city than all those cities, with all due respect. And I think once we're allowed to, this city will bounce back just as fast and go back to a sustainable market that will seek growth.
Yeah, 6 weeks, not 6 years.
Well, that's right. And, look, it's a really hard 6 weeks. And, you sort of scramble around, when the stage 4 lockdown was announced, and we're sort of scrambling around wondering, what does it mean for us? Do we have to shut our construction sites? How's that going to impact our programs? You do have to bring yourself back and say it is only 6 weeks. Now, 6 weeks is still a long time, and it's going to put a lot of businesses under strain. But, if we can get through this 6 weeks, it doesn't mean that the demand is gone. It's still there. It might have been delayed, it might have softened, but ultimately it's still there. And as you say, Melbourne is a highly desirable place to be. And I think, I'm quietly optimistic that, we will recover from it relatively quickly. But, there's a lot of water to go under the bridge. There's a lot of, I think, as I said earlier, support that government can provide, encouragement they can provide. And I think the investment will fly.
Great. Well, thank you, Sam, for coming on to our program. It was just so fascinating to hear from you, and also so good to hear some positivity in the market. So, thanks for coming on.
No problem. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.